parables of the Quran, and I think the first ayat has a parable, right? That's the only one I know. If you don't go to class, you don't know anything.
Yep. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we're going to continue, inshallah, with Tafseer Surah al-Baqarah. And we did actually talk about a number of different things before. And the way it started out, it's really important to actually look at these sides of it and where the story. So in Surah al-Baqarah, it starts out with ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is pretty much the prelude within Surah al-Baqarah. So we're talking about the beginning. And then it takes us, the Surah al-Baqarah takes us on these journeys. The first journey in where it tells us, well, how did people relate to this kitab? How did people relate to the kitab? So the first group in honor, it actually discusses the people that did take in the guidance, that did take in the clarity, they applied it in life. And of course, a very important thing, which is the issue of what is really the impact it has on the way they view the world. And why is that the main source of knowledge? Because the main source of knowledge is really the knowledge that goes beyond creation itself, in where it's the knowledge that was based on the purpose of life. The one that created life is really the one that has the complete knowledge over this life. So it talks about the people, the mu'mineen, and then it continues to talk about the people that had rejected the word that is al-kitab. Remember this whole thing, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. Then with al-kitab, this is supposed to be ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ. This is like the main prelude, and this is like the main topic. In where, okay, that main topic, that main center, how do we actually branch out in the relationship with this center? So the first one is that how people related to it, the mu'mineen first, and then the disbelievers, and then those that had claimed to be believers, but in reality, عز-الدين حذيفة روحوا عند أبوكم روحوا مع أبوكم. Then it talks about the munafiqeen, and the munafiqeen are simply the ones that had revealed an image of faith, but in reality, what they're hiding and what they're concealing was really disbelief. And then it actually continues to speak about their relationship and that parable part, in where their relationship and their connection, how do they actually react and relate with, again, that book, with the revelation? How do they react to it? How do they relate to it? How do they live their life based on it? And then it continues to actually speak about, well, where did the story really start? All right. It really started when, in the beginning of creation of Adam, or even before, when the malaika were there. When the malaika were there, the Lord Almighty asked the malaika and tells them of what's going to happen. So then this is in order to tell you, so why is it that when we talked about epistemology, when we talked about knowledge, what really makes a knowledge or any type of knowledge really genuine? In order for any knowledge to be genuine, it has to be, and of course, we're talking about life here. We're not talking about empirical knowledge. We're not talking about experiment and how you understand the function of things. We're actually talking about the purpose of life, why life was created. That's why the Surah al-Baqarah, after placing, speaking about how people related with, then it wants to say, well, this is where the story began. The story begins in the way the way that people were created. So the purpose of life has a foundation to it. And that is why in Surah al-Baqarah it speaks about Adam alayhi salam and where the story began. And then it continues to actually explain in more detail about okay, life and how people related to it. And then it talks about the different prophets and how people during different times of history, how the word that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent onto the prophets and messengers, how from the time of Adam, and then a little chronology right there, a little story in where it takes you what really happened to the story. And then it takes you into, well, speaking about the story, the story contained two different elements. The first element was aqidah, the second element was sharia. So let's talk about some sharias. So that's why in Surah Al-Baqarah, we talk about different sharias, whether that related to transactions or whether that related to marriage, that related to even Hajj, Umrah, etc. Then it talks about those different areas of sharia. In other words, that kitab, again, think of the prelude every single time. Think of the main point every single time we talk about this. And that main, and I'm like, why did everybody not come in? Now, that main point is really how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made that book, which is the Quran, as an area for people to learn how to understand the world. How to understand the world actually means how you apply haqq and how you apply hidayah in your life. And what is hidayah based on? Yes, vision is one side of it, but there's also the other side of it, which is sharia. And which is why Surah Al-Baqarah actually speaks in detail about a number of different rulings related to sharia in different aspects of life. And I was sorry about that, everyone. I didn't inform everyone that we actually started, and then I'm wondering, like, what happened? Why did everybody think there wasn't a class today? Until I realized that people weren't actually informed about it. All right, so let's continue right there. Hold on, let me just help people not by mistake start their video, and then poor thing, some sisters without hijab and stuff, and then they're unaware of it. All right, so let's continue. So let's go back in so the first part of Surah Al-Baqarah speaks the mu'min, and then it talks about those that had rejected the faith. So we talked about those, the mu'mineen, and we talked about how we compared it with the different segments or the different levels of faith. One, the level of Islam, the level of Iman, the level of Ihsan. We talked about how it's compared to here. And we talked about how the vision relates to people's actions. And of course, when we're talking about vision relating to people's actions, we're actually talking about the way they relate to life, materialistic life, the way they relate with the social relations, the way they relate with wealth and property and the different things that surrounds them. And of course, the way they relate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we go into the other groups. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Those that reject faith, those that kafaru. The word kafara actually means to conceal, to hide, or even to reject. So what did they reject? Well, they actually rejected, remember, the main center. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه. We're going to go back to ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه many times, because every single ayah, actually consider it like a circle. Okay, consider it like a circle. It's like a main circle right there, and then the different stories in the surah are actually relating to that main foundation, that main circle. You see what I'm saying? Yes. So for those, especially the visual people, their visual intelligence, think of it as it's like a little tree. There's this main trunk, which acts as the root. And then the different branches, those are the different ayat or / different stories in the Quran. They actually branch out from the main trunk, from the main root trunk, and then it branches out into different areas in order to make a complete tree. And of course, when we talk about a complete tree here, we're actually talking about a complete vision and a complete understanding on how you understand life, how you understand Sharia, and of course, in this part of the ayah, how you understand al-kitab, and of course ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين, and how you understand hidayah. Got it? So 2 things that you want to always focus on. All right. So whenever we're talking about Surah Al-Baqarah, we're actually focusing on number 1. Oh, my laptop just froze out.
What's the trunk? Kitab and Hidayah.
Kitab and Hidayah. The Kitab and the Hidayah. The Kitab is the main thing. Hidayah is what results from the Kitab. Got it? Yeah. So Kitab and Hidayah is the main thing. So إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا be what?
Kitab gives you Hidayah.
Exactly. The Kitab gives you the Hidayah. The Kitab gives you that idea. The Kitab gives you the clarity, because without that clarity, you really don't understand much about life. You just understand the surface. So that's why the ayah actually says those that rejected the book and the clarity, are basically سواء عليهم. It's going to be the same thing. Whether you had warned them or you didn't warn them, they're not going to believe. So what is the ayah trying to say? That the problem is not in the Quran into why they're not believing. The problem is really with them. They're nafs. They're the ones. It's not. So and this is really important because a lot of times people would assume that if this was the truth, that we would have enough people confirming so. The Quran is telling you, well, you got to watch out. You don't regard an information containing authenticity or even to be genuine or considered of any value simply because that person or this person or even a majority considered it as authentic or not. All right. The information itself may actually be based on accuracy. It may be genuine. It may be the truth, but don't be deluded by looking at a large number of people rejecting it and thinking, well, if it contained any authenticity or if it contained any validity, then we would find a lot of people following it. So the Quran is telling you, wait a minute, you gotta review on how you validate a certain piece of information. So this ayah, those that rejected, whether those that by the way, you guys, I don't allow iPhones during my class. So do you mind? Can I have an iPhone, please? Do you have an iPhone in your hand? Can I have it, please?
Yeah.
I'm really poor. I'll accept all donations. Jazakallah khairan, sweetheart. And mom, Zamzam, if you use your iPhone, it is going to be taken away.
I don't use iPhones.
Okay, good. What?
I use iPhone.
Okay, good. All right, here we go. أنذرتهم, whether you warn them or you don't warn them, in the end, they don't believe. Why don't they believe? Well, simply because the following ayah continues. ختم الله على قلوبهم, that the Lord Almighty sealed their hearts. Well, wait a minute. Is it that Allah Almighty sealed their hearts, or is it that their hearts themselves are sealed? If we are to say that it's Allah that sealed their hearts, that would mean that they're not supposed to be held accountable because it's beyond their control. They didn't choose it, okay? But here the ayah says, ختم الله على قلوبهم. So then it's not under their control. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't give them hidayah, then Allah's at fault. All right. Well, that's not what it actually means. So here, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم. Let's look at more detail. Let's look at those ayat in order to explain, why am I putting in some of the misunderstanding? Because many times those misconceptions become the famous tafsir that people mistakenly think that that's what the ayat are saying. So that's what I would like to explain. So ختم الله على قلوبهم.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay. Siri is definitely not confused. She said, I'm not sure I understand. Siri is lost. If Siri is lost, that's it. Absolutely. ختم الله على قلوبهم, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sealed their hearts. But here's the thing. It's not that Allah sealed their hearts. Here's one thing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the free will to choose to take the right path, and gave you the free will to choose the wrong path.
It's up to you.
It's up to you. So then, why did it say ختم الله على قلوبهم? It's that their hearts were so sealed that it is as if it's permanently sealed. It's never going to open. What does it mean to be sealed? The word khatama actually means it's like a firm stamp. It's a firm closure that it would take all the effort to open it, and it sure won't. So the ayah said khatam Allah, meaning from their early foundations, they chose to seal it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on their choice, sealed it.
Okay. Yeah.
All right? Sealed it. They took that choice. Ala qulubihim. Where's the seal on? Now, here is a very important thing. The ayah says khatam Allahu ala qulubihim. Notice it didn't say sudurihim. What's the difference between sadr and qalb? And of course, there's also afida. What's the difference between afida, sadr, and qalb? If you look at the ayat, you've got sadr actually comes in certain areas, qalb comes in different areas, afida comes in different areas. Qalb and fu'ad, they usually come in areas that relates to comprehension and understanding. Sadr, on the other hand, more relates to a broader understanding of things. It's a broader understanding. So the qalb is really making it the core. The sadr is outside of the core. So think of it as a fruit. You've got the crust on the outside or the peel on the outside, then you have an inner layer, then you have a very core of it, and the core of it really carries the DNA or even the ability to fruit and even make even more of that. All right. And that's the seed. And that's the core. The core carries that piece of it. Why did I say DNA? Because remember, with DNA, it carries all the information to produce the same thing, produce more of it. With one seed, you can produce a whole tree.
Yes.
All right. And that's a core. And that's the qalb. Now that's the same thing right there. Khatam Allahu ala qulubihim. The core itself is actually sealed and it's not capable of reproducing anymore, not ideas and not even produce any quality, anything of quality. It is totally sealed. So their hearts were so sealed from anything to even comprehend. And therefore, if the core is sealed, well, surely the outer is sealed.
This makes it very easy to live with an atheist. I don't have to deal with you. I just have to tell you I'm a Muslim.
Well, it doesn't mean, well, hold on, because we still have to do that piece of da'wah because we don't know whose heart is actually sealed and who's not.
Yeah.
The other day, I used to take my kids to the apartment that my mom is living in. And there was this guy who he just came up and he said, "Hey, you're Muslim," and held a short conversation with me. I was really avoiding long conversations on purpose. I don't like to hold long conversations with men. Now, later, my mom tells me, "You see that guy in the administration office?" I said, "Yeah." Said, "He's really interested in Islam." I was really surprised. He didn't at all show me of any interest when he had asked me about Islam at the time. But then later on, when I go to the administration office, he himself just opens up the subject. I just went, make a payment, and he opens up a subject and he says, "You know what? I studied theology and I don't believe in Christianity, even though I call myself Christian." This is what he said. "And I'm really in search of the truth." Just by himself. Said, "I'm really in search of truth. I'm not sure what to say of all the different religions out there. And I know that there's political pressure to change the truth, but I know that you don't care about watering down what you regard as truth. And I'd like to learn more." So I'm giving him right now the Quran and stuff. I didn't really think whatsoever that this man that I was having a conversation with about religion was at all interested. And by the way, I was actually talking to him about Islam and explaining certain things. Wallahi, his eyes were filled with tears. Wallahi, his eyes were filled with tears. I got out with goosebumps. I'm like, Ya Allah, you never know who to expect. Never know who to expect that their heart might actually be open. Speaking of Africa, I used to teach in a Swedish theological institute. Ironically, I was supposed to be the teacher to teach Islamic studies. Well, that's not the ironic part about it. The ironic part was that these people, that wasn't the irony there, but the irony was that these people were actually taking Islamic studies to Christianize Muslims. I was teaching them Islam. All right. So, right. That was their duty. This is real. This is real. So why was I even teaching them about Islam? Because I felt, I know this is real.
Did you know then when you're teaching?
No, I knew that these people were missionaries. That's a theological institute. I knew very well what this place
Did you teach
was.
the wrong person?
Well, no. Well, here's the thing. I actually went, I used to go there and actually teach frequently. And the reason why I accepted was not because I wanted to support them in Christianizing Muslims, but I actually wanted to go to the headquarters and actually do my da'wah there.
They did not know your husband.
Believe it or not, I had a number of those missionaries actually, change their path. Some of them from India, some of them from Africa. We had some of them from Holland and different places around the world, in where they didn't really know. Say, here's the thing. Somebody's either going to teach them how to put in the misconceptions alone, and somebody else might actually teach them what Islam really says. What Islam really says. And wallahi, alhamdulillah, a number of them had actually changed their path from studying and wanting to Christianize the Muslims to actually wanting to study Islam and review what their mission in life is. I remember one of them, he was a tall Indian guy. I know you don't really find tall Indian guys, but he was a tall Indian guy that he just took me on a side, in front of everyone, of course, and started really crying. He said, I never knew that this is what Islam really teaches. I'm actually going to change everything, and I'm going to go to Syria. And, I don't keep any contact with these people, but that's what he said he was going to do in order to study Arabic, in order to study the Quran. I don't keep, track of all the different students out there, but, just something, subhanAllah, you never know who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give hidayah to. Even out of the Sahaba, take a look, Umar ibn Khattab, he was actually going to kill the Prophet himself.
Yes, he was on the way.
You never know who hidayah actually touches. So, ختم الله على قلوبهم, that their hearts were sealed. Now again, remember قلوبهم. I want you to look at the word قلوبهم, because the word قلوبهم is actually plural. وعلى سمعهم, and on their hearing. But the word سمعهم is actually singular. Let's continue. وعلى أبصارهم. In other words, the sealing was on their hearts, on their hearing, and on their sights. Sights, it's a plural. There is a ghishawa. Ghishawa is like a blockage. It's like a layer, a veil covering. All right. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, and they have adhab. The word adhab actually means punishment, actually means pain. But the word adhab did not actually say al-adhab. وَلَهُمُ الْعَذَابُ الْعَظِيمُ. It actually came as indefinite. And وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, and they have great, or in other words, when you say great, it's not great to mean good, but it's actually great to mean in the vastness of it, in the different forms of it, that they would have different kinds of pains, punishments that are. But here's one thing. I loved one little, it's called the latifa. What is a latifa? A latifa is kind of like, something that a scholar might actually notice and just question. Like you could see qulubihim was in plural, sam'ihim was singular, and absarihim was plural. Why? And Tahir ibn Ashur actually mentions that the reason why that qulub was plural, he says, because qulub, as human beings, we actually have different ways of perceiving things. Now you want to remember the qalb is not in meaning the actual organ. This is talking about the figurative qalb, in where it's talking about the ability to think, the ability to comprehend, and in other words, the core of that area that is responsible for comprehension. It's not in the Quran mentioned that it was the brain. But the word qalb can actually include the core of the human being and not necessarily the heart to mean the organ that pumps blood. All right. Can the brain be a qalb? It can be a qalb and it can be al-fu'ad, because qalb means the heart of something, the middle of something, the thing that is in the center of everything. All right. So here, qulubihim, because the word qulub, so if their hearts were sealed, why? Because there is more than one way to comprehend and find hidayah. All right. You may have found hidayah in probably listening to tafsir. Another person may have found hidayah, probably they went through a near-death car accident and they found hidayah in approaching how they reached out, then discovered their weakness in a moment, and they reached out to find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there to support them, whatever it is. Another person might actually find hidayah in science. Another person might find hidayah, well, no, I need a catalog in life. I need an explanation in life. So another person might have found hidayah in one area. A third, and each and every single one of us can actually find clarity in a different path, in it from a different angle. What does that mean? When we talk about different angles to hidayah, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, all the angles that lead to bring about clarity to their heart, they actually sealed every single path. Got it? They sealed every single path. وَعَلَى سَمْعِهِمْ, and on their hearing, they sealed it. Why عَلَى سَمْعِهِمْ? Why is it singular? Because there's only one way to listen to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to interpret it and comprehend. In other words, there's only that ayah, there's only one wahi. And to actually hear, there's only one way to hear hidayah. To know hidayah, there's that ear. All right, there's that ear. You can't have your own interpretation of what you're hearing from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why he said, Sam'ihim, there's only one thing that you can hear. There's only one interpretation, and you can't have all these different routes. Why? Because the ayat are actually al-kitab. Remember al-kitab and al-hidayah as the core. There's only one thing that you can hear. So if I'm hearing, for example, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you're hearing it and we're all hearing the same exact ayah. There's only one interpretation, or at least, one way to think of it. You can't think of alhamd to mean some kind of a fruit in Africa.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's one thing.
It's one thing. So the revelation, that what you are hearing in terms of revelation, there's only one way to understand it. There's only one way where it's considered as guided. Any other way to hear and think of, well, I'm making up my own interpretation, well, that would actually take you to misguidance. وَعَلَىٰ أَبْصَارِهِمْ غِشَاوَةٌ, and on their eyes, there's actually a veil, or there's a covering. Why the absarihim? I want you to look at this. So the qalb is supposed to be the core of comprehension. The hearing is supposed to be the tool to help you hear things, which is to hear what? Al-kitab, in order to get hidayah. All right? Absarihim. Absarihim is actually plural, because when you look at with your sight, even though you can't necessarily see kitab, if let's say we're looking at the Quran, if somebody is blind, can they necessarily still reach hidayah? Yes. Even though they couldn't actually see the Quran, but they were able to reach hidayah. Why? Well, that's why if you go down in that same page, it actually said something really important in order to clarify that Allah يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون. The word ama is different than amah. Ama with the alif maqsura actually means the deformality in the ability to see. But amah is basically the deformality in insight.
So you have the Wi-Fi box, but there's no connection.
Well, the deformality in insight is different than sight.
You have the sight, but you can't see.
Absolutely. So that's why it actually explained that ya'mahun, in where they might actually have the ability, the tool to see, but that tool to see is actually not capable of seeing, even though there are so many different paths of how you can get to kitab al-wahi, the information that it contains, which is hidayah. But even those different tools to see and to get to hidayah, to get to guidance, was also concealed with them. Now, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. On the other hand, there's a different type of people. There are different types of people in how they related with the Quran or al-Kitab and with guidance. And those people are basically the munafiqeen. What is a munafiq? But this munafiq, there are two types of nifaq. There's one type of nifaq that is nifaq aqidah. What does that mean? Nifaq aqidah actually means that the person claims to be a believer. To the public, this person is a believer. The reality of them, they're not. They're concealing disbelief, and on the inside, they're nothing but another group of these people. الذين كفروا. All right. So that's why the ayah actually said وَمِنَ النَّاسِ. It's talking about the first group, which is nifaq aqidah, the hypocrisy in faith. The second type of hypocrisy is the hypocrisy in action. What is the hypocrisy in action? The hypocrisy in action is really where the Prophet ﷺ actually said, ayatul munafiqi thalath. That the sign of a munafiq, the sign of a hypocrite, are really three signs. إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ. When they speak of lies. وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ. And when they promise, they break their promises. وَإِذَا اؤْتُمِنَ خَانَ. And when you trust them, they would betray. All right. Now, what does that relate, and how does that relate to the disbeliever? Well, or the munafiq in aqidah. So the Prophet ﷺ is really saying that if that person, although they're actually on the inside Muslim, but if they had really believed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all seeing in their action, they would have not lied, they would not have betrayed, and certainly they would not have broken the promise. Why? Well, because to the core, they're actually believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually watching them to the core. So what really happened? Their action, these people that are munafiqeen in aqidah, their action is actually revealing the truth about how deep faith actually went into their heart. How deep did it go? Did it go so deep, or is it on the surface that barely touched their heart? So that's why when you look at this talking about the munafiqeen, so the second type of munafiqeen, in where munafiq al-amal, munafiq in action, those are still Muslim. But the munafiq in aqidah is not Muslim. So if they're not Muslim, do we necessarily relate with them as if they are Muslim? Did the Prophet ﷺ know who these people are? Certainly the Prophet ﷺ knew them by each and every single name. So if the Prophet ﷺ actually knew their names, why didn't he take a special stance with them? Just an example, when the Prophet ﷺ went to the Battle of Tabuk, in the Battle of Tabuk, you had the head of the Munafiqeen, Ubay ibn Salul. What does he do? Well, he actually stands up and says, and in fact, by the way, this was actually mentioned, the story was actually mentioned in Surah Al-Munafiqun. In the surah, there's actually a surah where it is clearly saying these people are hypocrites, and even quoted what they were saying. And who was actually being quoted here? It was actually Ubay himself, where he said, we're going to expel al-a'azzu minha al-adhal, the most honorable one of them and the least honorable. We're going to get them out of Medina. They have affected our jobs. They have affected our demography. They had affected our stability. Our political situation is harmed by these muhajirin, by these immigrants. Sounds very familiar, huh? All right. So that's exactly what Ubay was actually saying. The ayat were actually quoting him directly and clearly on the spot. Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ actually take a stance, a political stance towards these people? These people even talked about the family of the Prophet ﷺ and Sayyidah Aysha. These people were creating divisions within Medina, within the Muslim Ummah, just when they were going to face one of the mightiest armies in Palestine, basically, Bilad al-Sham, which is the Byzantine Empire, which actually had 40,000 troops. Mind this, you guys, they were actually adding up and joining in 40,000 troops. That is the Byzantine Empire. And the Muslims were barely making it to 30,000. But they still went. But the Munafiqeen, in the middle of the way, it just so happens, just like in our times, where you got somebody will say, Somali, Yemeni, Arabi, whatever it is. We still had that even during the time of the Sahaba. What happened? Well, they were trying to get some water out of a well. A small dispute, just like we dispute over bananas. All right. A small dispute over water. And what happened? Well, one of them says, hail to the immigrants and muhajirin. And the other one says, hail to the Ansar. In other words, what are they trying to say? It's like, we're trying to support our groups. We're trying to get their patriotism. What happened? Well, that's when the Prophet ﷺ actually, right in that situation, the Prophet ﷺ actually combined the Muslimin, and just when it was about to create a big division between the unity that the Prophet ﷺ was trying to work hard for almost 8 years in order to make a unity within Medina. What happens? Ubay wants to use and seize the moment in order to start sounding so patriotic to expel the Muslimin that were the Muhajirin and get them out of Medina. And said, hey, these are the people. We're going to need to review our mission here. Our mission is really harmed by these immigrants. And we need to focus on the most honorable of them. That is the Prophet ﷺ is what they mean. And the least honorable of them. We need to have a complete agenda on how to dismantle this group and get them and expel them out of Medina. Yarhamkumullah. All right. Now that's when the Prophet ﷺ actually says, leave it. Because it causes disunity. It was really over water, over a well. But many times we may not realize how such things actually break us apart. Now, why did the Prophet ﷺ actually take political action towards them? Because the Prophet ﷺ, although he knew their names, in fact, he told every single one's name to Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman. Why, Ya Rasulullah, you didn't take any action? He said, because I fear that if I were to kill any of them, that it might scare away many that are trying to come and embrace Islam And then the stereotypical image is going to be spread out that Muhammad even kills his own followers, his own companions. And that's why even PR, even media is to actually be taken in consideration. We can't be just one narrow-minded. That's not Dianbo, is it? How are you doing? Oh, mashallah. You guys, she's a mom. Oh, I had COVID before, so I want you to stay safe. Yeah, I would have really given you a big hug. I'm so happy to see you. No, she looks like a mom. Look at her walking like a mom. Her baby is almost 2 months now, right? Almost 3, mashallah. So where's the baby?
Oh, my mom.
She's already leaving her baby behind.
I visited for me and you.
These evil people, they already leave their babies behind. Oh my God. No, I'm just joking. You need a break every once in a while. That's okay. No, I wish I had my mom with me when I had my kids. Alhamdulillah. All right, let's do it. Where were we? Yeah, so to consider the PR relations or the public relations or even the media is actually part of considering a number of different things that affect even the Muslim community. So you can't say, I just want to do what's haq and I just want to do one thing and think of an extremist way, but you also have to take even the stereotypical images and take all the different things.
You have to still read CNN and Fox News.
You have to still read them. You still have to figure out. By the way, my master's and my PhD dissertations were actually relating to that. My master's dissertation was on the image of Islam and Muslims in the neoconservatives media. And then my PhD was actually studying Karen Armstrong and what she had written all about Islam and everything that she wrote on Islam. If you are not aware of what is being said, others are going to make the shape you within a certain image. And guess what? These people, and especially people like Karen Armstrong, are actually invited even by the Muslims, ISNA, and different organizations, even here in Minnesota, actually invited Karen Armstrong as a specialist on Islam. This is real. Guess how much she charges per hour? $20,000.
And we don't pay our teachers.
We paid, the Muslim community actually paid $20,000, let alone tickets and let alone hotel and everything. $20,000. And what do we invite her to do? To teach us our Islam. Are you serious?
I don't know who that lady is. Is she Muslim?
She's not Muslim. She's not Muslim. In fact, she actually, although she wrote positive things about the Prophet ﷺ, but she actually claimed that the Prophet ﷺ had plagiarized Islam from the Christians and the Jews and from the people in Iraq, and claimed that the Prophet ﷺ was lying about so many different things. This is the lady that we're inviting to teach us about Islam. And then this is impossible. This lady is actually talking about some religion, the universalism, which is, that God doesn't exist and God only exists in the hearts of people. This is real. And that's where her inclusivity actually comes from. And yet we're actually inviting her to speak. Musliba. What is musliba in English? Catastrophe. Catastrophe. If you see, here's the thing. When we don't know who our role models are, the ummah is in the biggest trouble ever. When we don't know who to actually invite to be on the microphone, we're in big trouble. When we're actually inviting somebody that is a kafir, when we're inviting somebody that actually attacks Islam to come and teach us about Islam, we're really messed up. There's no other way to put it. There's no other way to put it.
So the people that are inviting are those people are not like scholars in Islam?
You know what? I don't care. I hope the people from ISNA are listening to this, then they can quote me on that.
They're not in
The
class.
ICNA Muslims and all those. I spoke to some of them and I said, why are people inviting, these people that are, standing up to speak on the stage and actually presented as if they were the activists, the ones that teenagers, the youth, and the rest of the Muslims that are going there to actually take as an example. And they said, well, these people are the ones that actually bring the masses. But what's that? What are the audience really understanding? That this is actually what Islam says, that these people are the role models. These people are the idols that we should actually consider as our role models to replicate and to imitate.
She's looking for problems.
I'm hungry.
You're hungry?
She's
Hungry?
Oh,
You know, like,
This is the real thing. When you're actually inviting these people to actually speak, then do you
anyway, they're gonna
really
invite a Muslim?
what?
You're gonna invite Muslim people to come listen?
Well, there's a difference between me, for example, in inviting somebody that, let's say, a politician, all right, for example, a politician, all right, and this politician, where they're supporting
He's talking about public housing.
public housing, education, whatever it is, okay?
But not.
And between talking about things that have to do with the Sharia, like Linda Sarsour, it's not talking about public housing and it's not talking about, things, logistic things. Okay, maybe sometimes she does a good job in talking about Palestine, but here's one thing. But once she starts talking about things that relate to what we would consider as social, the social justice and all that stuff, that's the Sharia. That's legislature. You can't bring anybody to tell you about legislature and what is permitted or not.
You need a person who's
When somebody that is Muslim, even if she's wearing hijab and she's standing up in public, abortion, what do you need? Abortion. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Are you serious? This is real. This is real. This is real. Let's continue with the ayat before I start getting, just like Zamzam. She's about to break the bottle. All right.
I was thinking, what would Umar bin Khattab do in this?
Umar ibn Khattab. You know what Umar ibn Khattab once did? So there was this guy that was sitting in the masjid, all right? And, it's really strange. Umar ibn Khattab is a fascinating personality to really study. So story number one, Umar ibn Khattab sees a man, they make salah, and he gets up right away. Umar Khattab, bang, hits him on his leg and he says, don't you have a dua to make? Sit yourself down and make that dua. Okay. You think that man dared to get up again?
no.
Trust me, he probably continued to read Surah Al-Baqarah. Of course, this is not real, but he probably. Now, another story, look at the difference, all right? In another story, Umar ibn al-Khattab, it was dark, maybe pitch black or something, and he's walking to leave or do something, and a guy says, who do you think you are? Or something like that. Or actually, he said, Amajnun ant, are you crazy? He said, no, I'm Umar. You just called him crazy. He didn't ask you whether you're crazy or not. He's actually trying to condescend you. But he said, no, I'm Umar. So why did he get angry here and not get angry there? Because whenever the matter is relating to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's when he will act. When it relates to his person, when it relates to himself, that's when he becomes this humble man. That no, it's absolutely this is Islam. This is Umar ibn Khattab. This is not anybody. This is one of the Mubashirin bil Jannah. This is the one that the Prophet ﷺ said, if the shaitan goes one way, Umar ibn Khattab goes the other. If Umar ibn Khattab goes one way, shaitan takes another path. Not anybody to mess with. All right, let's continue. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَا يَقُولُ آمَنَّا. So some people. Why did it say some people? Because it's not exclusive to those people. It can happen at different times as well. There are some people that would say آمَنَّا. They would say, we believe. What? بِاللَّهِ وَبِالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. In Allah and Judgment Day. Wait a minute. Did they say anything wrong? They said, we believe in Allah and Judgment Day. But they were talking to the Prophet ﷺ. They didn't say we believe in the Prophet because they were so arrogant that they didn't even want to mention the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because they wanted to use that as a pass when they get to their people to say, hey, we didn't say that we believe in him. We just said we believe in God and Judgment Day. Why? In order to continue and create those alliances with the people of the book, Al-Kitab, Ahl al-Kitab, which are the Jews that were living in Medina at the time. Now, وَمَا هُمْ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. The reality and the truth of the matter is that they were not actually believers. What did they conceal? They actually concealed disbelief. But why did they actually do that? Well, the reason why they did that was really يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. They actually thought that they can manipulate Allah Almighty and the believers. Manipulate them for what? Well, they thought they could actually manipulate them. Looks like it's an important phone call. Spam.
That's fine.
Oh, really? وَالَّذِينَ وَمَا يَخْدَعُونَ إِلَّا أَنفُسَهُم. They thought that they can manipulate Allah, and they thought that they can manipulate the believers. But the reality is that they're only manipulating their own selves.
Does that person know that they're hypocrite in this case?
Hold on. وَمَا يَشْعُرُونَ. And they can't even sense it.
You can what?
They can't even sense it. So what does that have to do with anything? When you manipulate someone, you usually seek some kind of a gain, right? But when the manipulation goes against your gain and you can't even feel it, well, surely you are nothing but an idiot.
True. Because they cannot see Allah.
You thought you can manipulate Allah. In other words, what do you really lack? You couldn't even sense it. If you couldn't even sense how you were manipulating yourself, can you really sense anything else of reality? What does that mean? Who's the most one that knows how you feel about the world around you? Yourself, right? Do I know? No, I don't. But if you can't even know how you feel and you're manipulating yourself, that means if the strongest information about yourself is actually going against your own benefit, then surely you're not just manipulating yourself, but you're actually living in the biggest delusion. You're living in the biggest delusion in where if you can't even use your knowledge through senses, remember, we have different forms and different ways to know about the world. Our senses is one of them. But if you couldn't even learn through your senses that even relate to you, can you really learn what is beyond that?
But that's the scariest eye of them all, because you don't even, like, you're doing this and manipulating your own self to the negative, and you're not aware of it.
You're not aware of it.
So we really
نسأل الله العفو والعافية.
So we have to take serious what we act, what we did, and analyze it.
Right. So let's continue this ayah, because the whole ayah is really trying to explain that there was nothing wrong with the kitab and the hidayah itself. It was really something wrong with them. So what was wrong with them? So we saw الذين كفروا, that their hearts were really sealed, and their ears were really not hearing even the hidayah. Can they really hear it? But remember, here when it talked about sam'ihim, the ability to understand and comprehend the ideas and what was being said. So let's see What happened with the munafiqeen? في قلوبهم مرض. Remember, the qalb is supposed to be the tool or the ability to comprehend. It's not that pumping blood organ. In their hearts, there's an illness, and that increased their illness. فزادهم الله مرضا. Wait a minute. So what happened? في قلوبهم مرض. Initially, there was an illness in their heart. What was that illness? How can there be an illness? The illness is really from how they wanted to only gain materialistic gain. They didn't care about finding truth. فزادهم الله مرضا. And that actually added on the illness. So what does that mean? Let's go back and actually compare those ayat right there. So this one actually says ختم الله على قلوبهم. In other words, Allah had sealed their hearts. And this one says فزادهم الله مرضا. You cannot understand this ayah without understanding this one, and this one without understanding this one. Remember, who was the one that really did it? It was really that they themselves brought the diseases to their hearts, and because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increased the disease. In other words, who was the one that actually brought the illness? It was actually they themselves. فزادهم الله مرضا. Of course. And that's the same thing. Those that would take the right path. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. So you can't understand just one side. There's the other side in where those that would put an effort to find the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would guide them and open different paths to guidance. All right. Now, at the same time, those that choose to take the path of the illness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let them go on with their illness because they chose so. They took the path, they took the step of delusion, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the pattern. You choose one path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let you carry on with that path. He created a pattern in this world. فزادهم الله مرضا. It's somebody here. فزادهم الله مرضا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase the illness in their hearts. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْذِبُونَ. And they would have عذاب. Now here it said عذاب عظيم for الكفار. But here it said عذاب أليم. A painful punishment. بما كانوا يكذبون. Because of the lies that they were constantly making. وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض. Now here's one thing, is that they would have an agenda. Why were they actually coming to the believers and telling them, hey, we're here just trying to work out a resolution, a political alliance? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, when you come to them, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, and when they are told, لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, don't cause destruction on earth. What do they say? قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. What would they say? They would say, we're just here to bring about Islah, to bring about civilization, to bring about Islah, to bring about security, safety, to harmony, to bring about foundation, to make a city, to make etc. In other words, reconciliation. We're trying to make everything good. What were they saying? By the way, I don't know if you guys saw the post that I put, the post and where that man is stopping a colorful rainbow. I put on my Facebook. And oh, did you? That man was actually holding on to another man, holding him like with a grip that had, kind of like an evil hand, and it had rainbow on it. And I had some people commenting that that is actually dehumanizing these people. You shouldn't be dehumanizing them. But here's the thing. These people actually consider that they're actually muslihin, that they're actually trying to bring about safety, civilization, good in the community, etc. So am I really dehumanizing, or am I really creating a villain image of these people? Well, here's one thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation a certain way. Anyone that puts an agenda to go against the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether that agenda meant a discourse, a slogan, a political effort, the agenda to put something in schools, to go write a book, an agenda to march in a group, an agenda to vote for a certain law, etc. Even if you actually just put a check mark to let such agendas pass, is actually considered a form of supporting that group. And at the end of the day, you are actually going against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded as your duty in instilling, preserving how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created family, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created humanity, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually preserved I think and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually preserved humanity. Now, to go against that is actually creating destruction. The person that creates destruction is actually considered a villain. Simple. No need to say it in other ways and say, oh, we don't want to hurt their feelings. Say the truth as is. If you cannot say the truth, don't say the falsehood. Simple as that.
And they want to silence the truth,
Absolutely. انتوا يا ماما المرة الجاية والله العظيم مش جايين. All right, let's continue. وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون. Unfortunately, the recording is not happy today. ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون. So ألا إنهم هم المفسدون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying a clear word right there. Verily, they are the ones to actually cause destruction. In other words, and I want you to look at the word al-mufsidun, because al-mufsidun is actually making it clear that they are the ones that are actually causing destruction. In other words, they are the ones that are actually the destructionists. They are the ones that are actually the villain ones. Didn't say it in any other way. Say the truth as is.
And villain is not it's not an abuse to human. It just says they're doing the wrong thing and it's not acceptable.
Absolutely. Well, no, it's also saying they're doing the wrong thing and this should be stopped.
Correct.
All right. They're doing the wrong thing and this should be stopped. It's not trying to say, the pretty hellfire.
Yeah. There's no pretty hellfire.
There's no pretty hellfire. Hellfire is hellfire. Villain actually means cruel. Simple as that. It simply means cruel. Cruelty means you're doing something evil. There's no other way to put it. You don't want to call it a pretty hellfire. It's not a pretty hellfire.
It's
Say it what it is. Say it what it is. And of course, with our postmodern era, everything is supposed to be in a narrative that is not supposed to be a narrative in where it distinguishes right from wrong. It's supposed to be living everything in a gray area. Politically correct. Why is everything supposed to be in a gray area? Because in the postmodern era, it doesn't regard as anything as necessarily carrying any standard or a paradigm or anything carrying truth.
The truth is made up. as
The
we know.
truth is all about how you create truth. In other words, it's really based on individualism, existentialism. You create your own truth. You have your own perspective. And since we all have our own perspective, let's just be inclusive
Every perspective.
and let's just call everybody to say it except one. You say that you have or you believe that there's something right. That means you're not being inclusive, you're being exclusive, and therefore you should be banned. You should be shunned.
Happening, right?
It's happening. Absolutely.
It's actually hypocritical, 6% controlling 94%.
الله المستعان. وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا, when they were told, believe as, is this where we were? Yeah, no. ألا إنهم وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا, when they're told to believe as the people had believed. So what does that mean? Are we supposed to believe like the rest of the people? Let's continue the ayah and see. قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء. When they were told, the reason why they weren't actually wanting to believe is because they actually considered that most of the believers were actually part of the simple, the non-rich, the poor people, the not considered the very honorable, not part of the what are they called, the noble people. So what did they say? Elite. There you go. So what did they want? They considered, well, no, we're not going to believe like those people because they're not the elite. So when they were pointed out to some of the elite that were actually an elite even during the time of Jahiliyyah, they said those are just sufaha. They can't even think. They're just, with the word sufaha, a safih is basically a person that cannot think wisely. So they said those people are nothing but not wise people. Those people are nothing but idiots. In our time today, it's actually called an idiot. An idiot, although a term used by the lay English, the colloquial English, as to mean stupid, but that's not actually what it means. The word idiot actually began to mean the person that doesn't know about politics. All right, the person that is really controlled by others. All right, so they wanted to claim that, hey, these are just sufaha. These people can't even think. They're not even wise. ألا إنهم هم السفهاء. The ayah goes straight forward. So, as a matter of fact, they're the ones that are actually sufaha. They're the ones that actually lack the wisdom,
To think.
but they can't even know.
No, and
Why?
that's so scary.
It's so scary. Here's the thing. Notice that this ayah said لا يعلمون, and then here it said وما يشعرون. They can't even sense it. They don't even know it. They're tool, even though they had claimed to contain and to have wisdom, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, well, actually, they don't even know what they're talking about. ولكن لا يعلمون. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا
What they doing?
قالوا آمنا. What?
So they not know.
They don't know. They don't even realize it. All right. وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا.
Actually, when you say it will be maybe audible here, we not you not know where you think I'm like this, I'm like that. And only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala know who's a good person, who not a good person.
Right.
Wallah.
But remember, this is actually talking about how we relate with al-kitab and al-huda. All right. This is talking about how, remember, we said that the whole lecture is really based on the foundation of al-kitab and al-huda. So here, let's continue. وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. And when they would meet the believers, what would they say? They would say, we believe. Oh, we're with you.
Muslim.
Right. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ. But when they would meet their shayateen, who are the shayateen? This is not talking about shaitan where the person's having a personal conversation with the jinn. This is talking about the leaders, the main thinkers, the main leaders within their society, within their group, within their teamwork. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them shayateen. They look like humans, but really their actions carry nothing but evil. قالوا إن معكم. They would just tell them, well, we're with you. We're on the same page here. إنما نحن مستهزئون. We're just here trying to ridicule them. We're just here pretending to be with them. So what is this actually saying? That they were saying when they would be with the mu'mineen, they would claim that they're actually mu'mineen. In other words, they did recognize that they're faking a faith here, that they're faking their alliances. They really knew that. But the claim was that they were actually doing it for an agenda, for a purpose, that they were doing it for a good cause, just like they had claimed that they were muslihun, just like they had claimed that they were actually doing something for a good cause. They were trying to make a beneficial thing within the society. And this is where the ayah actually says, Allahu yastahzi'u bihim. Allah Almighty ridicules them. What does it mean that Allah ridicules them? Allah puts them in a place of ridicule because they're not realizing that they're actually manipulating their own selves and claiming that they're actually believers. And they thought that they're just playing a game, an agenda. وَيَمُدُّهُمْ. It's really close to the ayah when it actually said فَزَادَهُمُ اللَّهُ مَرَضًا, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases the diseases in their hearts because they started it. So here the ayah says وَيَمُدُّهُمْ, and he would add on. So when Allah يستهزئ بهم وَيَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ, in where their delusion, which their insight was so blinded from seeing that delusion. And that's why it said يَعْمَهُونَ, because al-ama is when you really can't see, a deformality in the actual organ, your ability to see. But ya'ma is actually when your insight is blinded from being able to see what is the truth. In other words, it's a figurative seeing and not an actual literal seeing. So this ayah is actually saying يَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ, that they started their delusion. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will indeed, because they started that delusion, they started that path, the path will continue based on how they started it. They started in that delusion, it will continue leading them to more and more and more delusion. أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى. Those are the people that bought. Look at this. The word اشتروا actually means to buy. Buy. B-U-Y. In other words, barter, trade. So those are the people that had bought الضلالة بالهدى. In other words, they sold guidance and instead they bought delusion. Wait a minute. Is this another group here or is this the same group? What happened? These people at one point, they did actually find guidance, but then they gave up on it. So what did they do? They left guidance and instead they got something of low quality, delusion. And then, فَمَا رَبِحَتْ تِجَارَتُهُمْ. Here's one thing. When you say to buy and sell something, if I have money, all right, let's say I have $3 and I wanted to buy a bottle of water. What do? I give you $3, and even though I value the $3, but I let go of the $3 in order to gain water, the merchandise, the good. But these people actually gave up on the huda, and instead of buying something of good quality, they instead bought something of no value, which is dalal,
falsehood.
falsehood, dalal, delusion. So فما ربحت تجارتهم, their barter, their trade was of a complete loss, because they didn't keep their net money, and they didn't get a good trade or a good barter either. And that's why their barter or their trade was of total loss. وما كانوا مهتدين, and they did not even keep any guidance. In other words, they lost everything. They had guidance at one point, but then they gave up on it and chose something else. And then in the end, because they chose to give up on it, they have lost الهداية. They had lost it.
I have a question.
مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا. The example in how they're compared they're very, in the Quran uses this frequently, and where it talks about that, how do you compare this? They're exactly like the ones استوقد نارا. They built a fire, all right? فلما أضاءت ما حوله. Then when the fire blazes in it, everything starts getting the light. ذهب الله بنورهم. What happened? Their light turns off. So what happened? وتركهم في ظلمات لا يبصرون. What happened? They turned the fire. Now they were able to see everything. In other words, the fire here is actually the fire here is actually speaking about a metaphor in where it is comparing the iman as the light that you would see when it's so dark around you and you light a fire and everything becomes so clear to you. But then you choose to turn off the fire, and everything becomes so dark again. What happens? تركهم في ظلمات لا يبصرون. Then they're left in darkness where they cannot see anything. Sum, can't hear the truth. They cannot speak it, and of course, they can't even see it. And then they can't even go back to it. They totally eliminated all the light that was there. Or أو كصيب من السماء. It's like a صيب. A صيب is like the rain. That's like a cloud filled with rain, where the rain or that cloud contained the rain, and in the rain, of course, it comes with a package. There's the darkness of the rain, the darkness of the cloud that it brings, and there's the sound that rain comes with, the sound of thunder, and there's the seeing. When you you hear the thunder, you see the lightning. All right. So you get something to hear, something to see, and of course, surely there's something to feel. What do? Even though this water is coming down, or this water will be coming down, what do? يجعلون أصابعهم. Out of fear from the sound of lightning, the sound of thunder, what do? Out of fear, they would put their fingers inside their ears. من الصواعق, from the fear of thunder. حذر الموت, out of fear from death. والله محيط بالكافرين. Here's what happens, that they would cover their heads, all right? They would cover their ears, they would cover their ears, even though the thunder's on top of them. Why would they cover their ears? They would cover their ears because they're in fear of death. when you're afraid of a sound of something, you don't want to hear it. You try to eliminate the sound in order to eliminate the fear. All right. So what were they doing? They're eliminating the sound of haqq. And then they were closing their eyes. But the reality is, truth surrounds you all around. You can't run away from it. You can choose to not hear it. You can choose to close your eyes and not see the truth. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, Wallahu muhitun bil kafirin. And the Lord Almighty surrounds the disbelievers in every corner. In other words, surrounds them with the truth about everything and surrounds them with his power. In other words, to turn off your hearing from hearing the truth or closing your eyes doesn't close the fact that truth and Allah's power surrounds you from all over. يَكَادُ الْبَرْقُ يَخْطَفُ أَبْصَارَهُم. الْبَرْق, the thunder, or the lightning, sorry. It is almost about to, when the light comes so strong, it almost was going to take away their eyes, their ability to see. كُلَّمَا أَضَاءَ لَهُم. Every time they would see the lightning, they would take a few steps. In other words, whenever the lightning comes based on their desire, they would use it to guide them in their life. But then what? وَإِذَا أَظْلَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ قَامُوا. Then when it's dark again, they'll just stand, not aware of what to do, or walk in that darkness. وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَذَهَبَ بِسَمْعِهِمْ وَأَبْصَارِهِمْ. And if the Lord Almighty would have wanted, he would actually have taken away their hearing and their seeing. In other words, it's not that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away their hearing and their seeing. Allah would have been capable of doing so, but he gave them the chance and the tool to continue hearing and seeing. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Sadi. That Allah Almighty is capable of everything. Now, when we look at this ayah, what is the parable really trying to say? Sorry, that's my son. All right, so we'll stop right there. يا أيها الناس اعبدوا ربكم الذي خلقكم والذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. Inshallah, we'll continue in talking more about that one. My son is calling me. You guys can hear him.
All the way from there.
All the way from there. So Jazakumullah khairan, everyone. If there are any questions, unfortunately, this was actually, it seemed like the recording wasn't complete for our YouTube. I might actually redo this tomorrow morning. Just because I have to have a complete set. So I might actually do it again. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. Let's see, here's one. I love Ian sending me a happy flower and a happy face. Anybody has any questions? And I will allow you to actually, the people unmute themselves if they want to.
Does that explain why they hate? Because I know of people who left Islam, and every time they ever pass through my life, either of course in social, in the phones and anywhere else, they have this pure hatred for Islam. It's like their whole life is Islam is burning them. And I'm like, does that connect to what I don't know why people who leave Islam have this passionate hate for Islam? Like Aunt Hirsi, she would just sit down and like sometimes you're like, subhanallah.
Well, here's the thing. في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا. Their hearts actually contained that illness from the beginning, and it's going to continue. They chose that path, and it becomes like the illness in where really it becomes this illness in where they want to reject hidayah and totally to reject hidayah, and whenever they would see hidayah, it becomes like this light that I can't see it anymore. I don't want to see it. But of course, they will claim that, like Ayan Hirsi. She will claim that, oh, I was actually tortured, and she'll make up all these lies that even Holland actually discovered. She'll make up all these lies. I was forced to do this and I was forced to do this. I was like, just to gain uh, sympathy from al kafirin.
You know, that ayah, Hafamallahu ala qulubihim. Exactly, I was watching this da'wah. There is young men in Mombasa. They have this YouTube channel. It's in Swahili, and he goes out to the town, and then he debates with Christians. And there's this pastor. He is so mean and evil. This ayah is about him. I mean, it's complete. He's even converted two Muslim brothers who were Muslim before into Christianity. One of them was a very like somebody who had learned a lot about Tafseer and Quran and stuff. He's using this guy to be his, like, they sit at the table and they go through both books,
Right.
the Holy Quran and the Bible. And the funny thing is, and the guys that he's debating against are people that used to be pastors and now are Muslim. So they know both deen very clearly and very well, and very articulate men, But the pastor, everywhere and every time that they show him their path, and they say, this is how the Quran says about Jesus and about deen, about Allah, about this, he will turn it around and use those same verses in the Quran to show them that it's not right.
Right, right. Subhanallah, in the end, is that they're the ones that are actually going to lose al-hidayah.
And then he said, Sumun Bukmun Umyun. He said that, and I'm like, it's about that Sumun Bukmun is you. Why are you not even seeing it? It doesn't see it.
Allah al-musta'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us steadfast.
Inshallah.
And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us hidayah all the time. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that don't fear to speak the truth. And jazakumullah khairan, everyone. Barakallahu feekum. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair. I just love this.